Welcome to my science class. I'm Mr. Coe, and I'll be hiding down in the corner while I take you on a little tour. In this video, I will show you how you can access everything covered during this presentation for later reference. So kick back and relax, and I will get you through this as efficiently as I can. One more thing I want you to know before moving on. Our 7th grade science is really a team effort of 3 teachers, Mrs. Byrne, Mr. Drewby, and myself. And that's why you see all 3 of us represented on the screen. So what we will cover, my background, a little bit about me, Skyward Google Classroom contact info. We'll make sure you understand where to get grade details. The many resources available to you. That's, from my perspective, the number one thing I want to get through to you in this presentation. An overview of the Amplify curriculum, how we do assessment and grading in that curriculum, reminding ourselves of the big picture, especially during these strange times, and then we'll close. The many numbers of my life and career. I'm going to start in the upper left. 32 years is the number of years I've been working with students, athletes. I was given coaching jobs right out of high school and have continued either coaching or teaching since then. 26 years of official certified teaching. I have 10 plus years of college in. I have a double major and a bunch of other stuff and a master's degree, et cetera, et cetera. And I am endorsed in 5 areas, but basically all of math and all of science. I've taught grades 6 through 12, at least 3,600 students at this point. I happen to be 50 years old. I've been married 22 years to my wonderful wife, Heather, who has traveled through Sunnycrest and is currently at Highland teaching elementary school. And I have 2 children, one 13-year-old boy who is at Cavallero and one 17-year-old daughter who is at the high school. And both of them have been in Nick Stevens from the get-go. Please be sure we have your correct and current contact information on file in our Skyward system. It is our only way to communicate with you. Contact Northlake office or district office if your information is not correct or needs updated. Google daily or weekly, but I'm going to heavily emphasize the daily, summaries. How to get Google Classroom Guardian summaries. Summaries are without a doubt the best way to stay informed in class. To do that, I need you to imagine your email here. I have a screen called Invite Guardians, and if you have an email in there, I know you've been invited and may have accepted Guardian emails. If there's nothing in there, I'm going to use Skyward information to put it in there, and then you're going to get an invitation email to accept daily or weekly summaries if you want them. And if you're not already getting these summaries, look for an invitation email before the end of the week. Here's information found in a summary. Note, students complete work in Amplify and then mark it as done in Classroom. Okay, so Classroom is their resource and time management tool. Amplify is their workspace. So please be aware that your student could mark something as done in Classroom and not have actually completed the work in Amplify. Okay, if you're unsure, you should have your student log into Amplify and show you their work. It never goes away. You will always have access to what they do in Amplify, turned in or not. But from Classroom's perspective, if there's any missing work, you would see it listed in the email summary. Things that are upcoming, due soon, activities or things that they're working on in class every day. It's all going to come to you automatically. Be sure to look more closely than just an overall grade if you're checking grades in Skyward. What you need to do is when you see that overall letter grade for a class, you need to click on that letter grade to see the detailed description like you see below. And that is an assignment by assignment breakdown. And that's really where the valuable information is. We do have a public website for 7th grade science, and we are now going to take a tour. So here is a public website in which we share with you everything we possibly can. We can't let you into Amplify because we would have to pay for you to have an account, and also with student privacy laws, same thing there. That's the other reason we can't let you into Google Classroom. We cannot use a parent email. It won't let us unless you're within the district domain. And again, that is because of federal privacy regulations. So what we do is we give you everything we can outside of those 2 systems. And here's just a quick overview of the homepage. The Happening Now page tells you what we are working on. So we had just finished geology on Mars, and we're now beginning plate motion. The calendar is actually the calendar that is shared from Google Classroom. So you are seeing live due dates as we update them. Class material. We make all of our teacher documents public that we can. So as long as they don't contain student information, we're going to make them available to you, including, for example, this curriculum night presentation. We'll go into here and you can see it. But all of the support materials that students are using in class, these are our live documents. They are not copies. So when we update something, it is instantly updated and you are seeing real time what's going on. Amplify also has some support materials, especially during this distance learning time, Amplify at home. I don't think they're quite as detailed as ours, but if you want to peruse those for your enjoyment, you can. Class videos. We record our lesson instruction. So we have it in multiple forms, and we'll show you more of that in a minute. And those playlists are posted here. So if you want to see me, hear me delivering instruction, you can do that. If Mrs. Byrne, Mr. Drewby as well. Under the More. If you want to go further or need more resources or have other interests in science, we've just listed a number of things that might be helpful, including Lake Stevens resources, technology support, that sort of thing. Frequently asked questions. Right now, they just tend to be, how do we get help when something goes wrong in technology? So this is a link to a technology support page. And then you can also follow me, Mr. Co, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can also receive remind announcements. Mrs. Byrne and Mr. Drewby will share their information in some other way. So back to our presentation. The next thing we want to take a tour of is Classroom. Classroom is our student home base. So let's take a quick tour so you can see what the students see without revealing. I won't go to any areas that are going to reveal student names, but when students arrive at the stream, I keep my stream very clean. I do not like the scroll of death, they call it, where things randomly get posted to the stream. We keep everything in the classwork tab where it's organized by topic. So some things to point out for you. This class, currently my first period class, I have the icon on for the Google Meet. Students know that a live session is going on and it's going to stick according to the schedule, but a live session is open, and this is how they access it by going to the Google Meet icon at the top and join the live session. Daily attendance is a question, and all they have to do is click present. We do that every time we enter a live session. Okay, so attendance is taken together, but students are welcome to take attendance anytime during the 24-hour period, so it's recorded in Skyward. Units. Currently, plate motion has just begun this week, so plate motion is the unit at the top, and it is organized in numerical order. Some things to point out: if you're looking at your screen and comparing it to your student's screen, it could look slightly different. Anywhere that there is a Google form listed, the child would have a 504, an IEP, or some other modified instructional method, and we use Google Forms to deliver that. And so if your student is not receiving modified instruction, they will not see the form. If they are, you can be sure they're getting modified instruction and they will see the form. And then they have the choice of completing the standard lesson or the modified lesson. Okay? You'd be surprised how many times kids choose to do the standard lesson in Amplify, because it does seem to incorporate so well with all of the other modifications. I'm not going to click on the People tab because it would reveal all of the students' classmates, and this way they can directly message each other, especially during this time where it does benefit talking to other students, and they might be too shy to do it in a live session, or a question might come up outside of that. They might choose to, instead of emailing me, ask a classmate, and they can do that there. The due dates. Due dates for each assignment are posted. They are posted weekly because during this time I've encouraged that best practice is to be flexible for families. The idea is about a lesson a day, give or take. And the due date being due on Friday says, look, sometime during that week, we want you to try to finish that up. Due dates are not solid. What I mean by that is they are a time management. This helps you and the students know what topics what lessons we will talk about during the week. If a student needs to extend time into the following week or after, that is totally fine. They just have to notify me that they finished stuff outside of that time period, because I won't be going back and checking the hundreds and hundreds of screens I would have to check to see if a kid has done something. Again, the due dates are flexible, they're guidelines, and students are not, I guess the most important message there is students are not, their grades are not reduced due to timeliness or anything like that. It has no impact on the grade whatsoever. Okay. And then our previous unit before this was Geology and Mars, and it's still down there available for those kids who still need to access that work and complete the unit. Okay. Next up, we also provide an instructional website to support the lessons even further. So I don't want you to get confused between the public website. The public website is designed to just keep parents informed of the key activities that are going on. If you want to look a little further, the Amplify page you see here is detailed instruction. This is where we house each lesson, video, materials, and instruction. Right? Now, students work in Amplify, but oftentimes outside of live sessions, they need further instruction, and this is where they get that. So we'll take a quick tour of what that has to offer. So currently we are in plate motion unit. So I'm going to use plate motion as an example. So a student would come here and click on plate motion if they so choose. Okay? And let's say they are in chapter 2 and they are working on lesson 2.2. And so when they get there, what the lesson page has for them is everything we would deliver in the classroom. First off is a direct link to the Amplify lesson. So if they were to click on that link, it would actually take them to Amplify, to the lesson they're working on. It reminds them in their lesson brief that what they can find. It also includes a drive folder. And again, this is the same drive folder that students would see in the public website that I showed you earlier, the parent site, and they can access everything in there just like they would, that you could from the public website. These are all the same documents. They're not copies. All of the slides for each lesson, they find PDFs, documents, evidence cards, articles. All of that is available to them in the online Amplify curriculum, but it is also available to them where you could print it out or look at it without being inside of Amplify. Below, there are step-by-step instructions. For example, this lesson has 4 steps to it. And so you will see Activity 1 video as well as Activity 1 slides. So students could either listen to the teacher deliver the lesson or the instructions for that step, or they can open the slides, which is what we saw a moment ago, and they could see slides and take them through the instructions for each of the activities. And if a lesson had 5 steps, you would see 5 slides. If you had 6 steps, 3 steps, right? And it's going to take them through the entire lesson. And so that's the purpose of that site. Now, if we head back, we're going to get into a more general discussion really quickly. Amplify is built on science standards. So before we look at an Amplify lesson in detail, it helps to have some background as to how and why it is designed the way it is. The history of science and math standards goes back decades. So it's something we have a strong base and a strong history in education. It's something we've been talking about long before you heard this big switch over to standardized curriculum, say, in the last 10 plus years. So Lawrence Hall of Science are authors of the curriculum. The Learning Design Group in Berkeley, California, does ongoing research and improvements to the curricula. And Amplify is actually just the online technology delivery system. And I encourage you to look them up if you want more information about them. The authors of the curriculum are not a publishing company like you've typically gotten in the past. They have a long history of science education, and I'm actually very proud that we chose to partner with them. You are welcome to watch the Amplify video that's embedded within this presentation. I'm not going to show it to you now. The presentations already go long enough, but this will be shared with you, and you can look for a message or email from me at some point by the end of the week. You can open up the slide, go to slide 14 here, and actually watch their little overview video. Now, this section on argumentation is actually from a previous presentation I sent out earlier in the year, but I do want to review it really quickly because it does explain how Amplify is organized, and it tends to make more sense when you kind of imagine it this way. So the focus is on scientific argumentation, okay? And it's the basis design of every unit. Yes, there are assessments, a pre, a mid, and a post for every unit. But outside of that, it's designed mostly around this argumentation. So we will be covering 5 units by the end of January with our condensed school year. And here are the main roles of each chapter within a unit. So once you enter a unit, this unit has 4 chapters, as most units do. Chapter 1, its role is to introduce the phenomena or the question to be answered or problem to be solved with some initial evidence. Chapter 2 goes on to give more evidence, often simulations and modeling that takes place there. Chapter 3 occurs after a mid-unit assessment. It's customized to where students need more support. They're provided more evidence or a similar scenario to work through. And then finally in Chapter 4, it's the assessment chapter. New information is seldom introduced. It's more an opportunity for students to argue verbally and in writing, and it contains their final assessment. Now, if we take a look at a chapter, this chapter has 4 lessons. Some chapters have more, some chapters have less, and this is how students enter an individual lesson. And once they do choose the lesson to work on, they will see steps, numbered steps along the way. In this screen, the T step would not show up on their end. It shows up. It's something the teacher needs to do while students are working to be prepared for the next step. Okay, and here's an example of a single step of a lesson. This is step 1, or the warm-up. Now, I do make a note on the screen, and I remind students you can navigate by clicking on the numbers above, but that lower navigation button is the best way to navigate through a lesson. It will take them to the next step because some of those steps require them to hand in work, and if they forget to go down to the bottom and hand it in, it doesn't notify me that it's time for me to review their work. Now, students present arguments much like a lawyer presents a case. So scientific argumentation is much like a lawyer building a case for the courtroom. Guilty or not guilty becomes or is replaced by claim 1 or claim 2 in a unit. Facts and evidence are very similar. They are what we gather during lessons to make a strong case. Now, reasoning is where students explain how the evidence supports the claim they chose. Students argue verbally and in writing in almost every unit. These are the 3 components of every argument. Students are assessed on their ability to communicate these components. Okay. Claim. Students will be given 2 claims to choose from early on in a unit, often in Chapter 1. Okay. They will collect evidence from articles, models, videos, and each other in Chapters 1 through 3. And then the reasoning takes place that they will explain their choice verbally and in writing and during a final assessment in Chapter 4. Okay, but remember, Amplify is where students do almost all of their work. So if you want to see the work that they're doing, you have to go into Amplify to see it. Okay, here's an easy to understand standards-based grading rubric. From left to right, they represent what would be considered 3rd grade, 5th grade, middle school, and high school standard levels. So for any topic or standard that we're looking at, students are going to be measured whether they meet it at basically a 3rd grade, a 5th grade, a middle school, or a high school level. Effort, resilience, and persistence are commended. They're important characteristics of every one of us, but they are not part of the assessment process. You don't earn extra credit. You don't earn bonus points. You are measured strictly on how well you show your understanding. So how might that play out here's a 4-week path that a student might travel on in order to demonstrate their understanding of their typical unit. So the class is presented with a scenario early on. They make initial claims. They are presented with data. Possible claims are explored in greater detail. Students model ideas to test claims. They actively read using reading strategies. They have continued discussions as a class. Oral arguments are presented in small groups, and written arguments are developed over time, one concept at a time, including use of the writing process. So students never work from memory. They're continuously revising their work, comparing it to their class. Collaboration is continuous, yet students do not depend on other students to complete their work to finish. Participation is key. The act of participating in the lessons constructs the final process. It is built into the lesson structure. So scoring examples. We'll take a quick look and overview of what levels might look like. So a score of 1. Okay. This answer provides a relevant claim, but no evidence that can be tied to the claim. So what illness do you think our patient has based on the symptoms? I think she has cancer, so there's a claim. Why do you think so? My aunt had cancer. Well, that might be true, but it's not evidence that allows us to come to any conclusion. It doesn't tie in. What's presented to us in this answer isn't anything that would help us determine whether that claim is true or not. A score of 2, this answer provides a claim and one piece of evidence that is reasoned back to the claim. So it's the same claim in the answer, cancer, but this time it mentions test results being matched to the patient with cancer the closest. It is also said that in the cancer article that patients' white blood cell counts would be abnormal. So they've provided evidence from the unit that does help us make sense of the answer. In a 3, the answer goes further, providing more reasoned evidence and are refuting an opposing claim. So there's sufficient evidence and reasoning to back the claim for the reader to understand this position. A score of 4 would provide extensive relevant evidence that's fully reasoned. The reader would have no question as to the position and logic behind the argument, as well as refutation of an opposing claim. Okay, so when you read a level score answer, you completely understand what the person understands, and there are no questions left in your head about making connections. So key points to understand grading that you might see along the way and in Skyward. So we use standardized grading, which means there are 1 to 4 scores will be converted to percentages using the following scale. Now, we don't consider 0 necessary. No student is measured at 0 if they are providing answers. 0 is reserved for missing, and it scores in Skyward as a 50% with a missing indicator. A level 1 is converted to a 65% in Skyward, since Skyward is a percentage-based, points-based system. A level 2 is represented as 75, a level 3 represented as an 85, and a level 4 represented 100. So if you think of it in traditional grading, 0 missing is an F, D is a 1, 2 equates to a C, 3 a B, and 4 an A. Work will and can be redone. Okay? It is accepted. Work is accepted up to the grading period deadline. And by that, I mean, when Skyward forces us to roll over to the next grading period, we can't update grades previous to that. So once we get to a grading period, I will remove the missing indicators from anything that's missing. So students are not, it doesn't show up in the grading period that they couldn't do anything about it anyway. And then progress between assessments. So because assessments are so spaced out, I will record no count scores for each chapter's activities. This will let you know how much work is being turned in, and if a student's progress score is helpful to their grade, I will remove no count once the assessment is completed. So what that means is they start a unit with a pre-assessment. It was going to be 2 more weeks before they take a mid-assessment, and it really isn't fair to hold them to a grade on the mid-assessment, because the mid-assessment still covers things they haven't encountered yet. It is the same test, beginning, middle, and end. It is there to measure their progress, and we don't expect them to have full understanding, at the beginning or midway. And if we recorded a grade as is, of course, it's going to show the need for improvement. So what I do instead is I put the grades in as no count, so you can see where they're at and they can see where they're at, and then work completion, I will put that in as a grade, but it is going to be no count because we don't give them just credit for doing stuff. They have to show understanding. Our goal in standardized grading is to measure their understanding. But what I will do is, once we've measured their understanding, to reward them for completing the entire unit. And they may have shown understanding in those daily lessons that the that the final assessment might not represent. So if they've completed everything and that would be helpful to report as to their progress, I will uncheck the no count and allow that score to count. But I will never allow a score from along the way to pull a student's grade down. So it can only help and not harm. So we're approaching the end. I want to make sure we emphasize what is most important first at their age level. And that is sleep, diet, exercise, limited screen time, organization, and relationships. This is what's going to help raise a healthy child. And then science comes right after that. Okay. In the class, it is designed to help develop what we call the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. The most valuable skills we can develop in them as they move forward. I encourage you to have conversations at dinner if your schedule allows for it. You feed them, they feed you. If you ask good questions, the time spent will be worth it. Before we go, Remind is another way we can communicate. I will start using Remind now that Curriculum Night presentations are available for viewing. So if you text at @Co406 to the number 81010 on a phone, it will sign you up. You can also go to Remind website and do the same. Thank you for your time with me. I know it's extensive, but hopefully it provides useful information. And you can always contact me if you have questions, and you can do that most easily through Skyward, or if you sign up for Remind or any other method by email. I will be glad to help.